Hello and welcome to the Runners World podcast with me, Rick Pearson. Today I'm speaking with BBC broadcaster Sophie Raworth about running the OCC. For anyone unfamiliar with the OCC, it's a 55km race in the Alps that is part of the UTMB race series. There's 3,300 metres of elevation, it's extremely technical and takes most people well over 10 hours to complete. Sophie talks to me about how she managed to train for it and why endurance running is one of those rare sports that allows us to improve even as we reach our 40s, 50s and beyond. My racing is a little less impressive than Sophie's, but I shall be lining up at the Big Half this weekend, so a big shout out to any listeners doing the same. If you see a man struggling to keep pace with the 1:30 group, it could quite possibly be me, and I will be accepting gels, sweets and words of encouragement from strangers, so hopefully see some of you there. Right, so without further ado, let's get on to speaking with our guest of the week, Sophie Raworth, about the OCC.
Guest of the week, here in the studio. Guest of the week, sometimes on the phone. Could be an athlete, could be a physio, or a complete unknown.
Our guest this week is BBC broadcaster Sophie Raworth. Sophie's just returned from Chamonix, where she recently completed the OCC. So Sophie, welcome to the Runners World podcast. Great to have you on.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Congratulations. How are you feeling after the weekend's efforts? Yeah.
I am hugely relieved. I signed up to do this race, the OCC, which is I'm sure a lot of people will know, is the baby race of the UTMB, that very famous trail race around Mont Blanc that starts in Chamonix. And the OCC is the smaller one. So in my head, I thought I wasn't going that. I thought it'd be not so difficult.
Yeah.
And it is actually 35 miles long, and it is so much climbing. And I'm really glad I hadn't really got my head around what I was doing, because if I had known what was coming, I think I would have pulled out.
So what was it about the OCC then that kind of piqued your interest? Why did you sign up for it in the first place?
That's a very good question. Do you know what? I signed up a long time ago. It was sort of pre-pandemic. It was one of those races. And I think I just come back. I think it was just after I'd done the Marathon des Sables, which was back in 2018. And I thought, oh, I got a taste for this long distance running. Yeah. And I had a friend who I was running with, a Portuguese friend who I ran with a lot in London. And he was doing the full race, the 106 miles, around Mont Blanc, and they climb something like more than 30,000 feet in that time. And he did that race, and he was telling me all about the UTMB, and I'd heard about it before, and I'd had other friends who'd done it, and I thought, go on then, why not sign up? And it's notoriously difficult to get into, and there's a ballot, and so it was from a long time ago, and it was sort of rolled over, and here I was with a place post-pandemic, and I thought I better do it because it's so difficult to get into. But it was quite extraordinary. It was up there with the long stage of the Marathon des Sables, definitely, and it was one of those things I really actually didn't think I could do. When I got to the finish line, I was so relieved.
Because as anyone who's been to Chamonix or the Alps knows, it's on a completely different scale, isn't it, than certainly anything in the south of England, where I guess you were doing most of your training. How did you try to replicate what you were going to have to do?
Well, for quite a long time, I didn't think I was going to go. I was so convinced I wasn't going to be able to go, or I'd have to pull out, or I pulled a muscle, and then I thought, that's it, it's going to be all over. Yeah. And so to be honest, I didn't train nearly as well as I should have trained. And also my work over the last 7 or 8 months has been mad. I thought I didn't realise, but I was asked to stand in for Andrew Marr on the Politics show. So I was doing every Sunday plus my normal job, so I was basically doing 6 days a week. So my training, you can imagine the long Sunday run when you were actually working on a Sunday morning, went out the window. So it was all a bit hodgepodge, my training, and I only really stepped it up. I've just been doing basic sort of marathon training, and I stepped it up in the last 6 weeks or so. I spent a lot of time on the Isle of Wight, and the biggest run I did was 24 miles across the Isle of Wight. Okay. But that was less than 3,000 feet of climbing, and last Thursday I had to do 12,000 feet. So there was something of a gap between my training and what I actually had to do, which is often the case, isn't it?
For someone who hasn't been to the UTMB, what is Chamonix like during race week?
Do you know, it was absolutely spectacular. I had 4 very, very happy days. I couldn't stop smiling. It was, you go to, I mean, I've been to the Alps, I've skied. I've only ever gone down mountains. I've
Right.
never gone up them. And I've never been to the Alps in the summer. It was beautiful, obviously, to start with. And then I arrived in Chamonix, which I've only ever been to once years ago with my dad. I mean, like 20, 30 years ago. And I arrived in Chamonix, and it was the atmosphere. It was absolutely buzzing. There were races already underway. It's a week of races, and there are 5 main races that start. The biggest, I think the smallest is 40K, and the biggest is 171K, which is the UTMB. And there was a race that was already underway, and there were people coming. I kind of got an idea of what I was in for, because I saw, as I drove in, there were people coming off the mountain, these sort of haunted looking people who as it turned out, had been out there for more than 40 hours, I think. And you go in, and there are big screens around the town. The town is packed. There's not an ounce of body fat in sight. I've never seen so many fit people in my life.
Right, yeah.
And everyone is in running kit, and everybody is jogging and doing this and running and, you know, walking with poles. And you've got these big screens, and people just congregate around them and watch the races. And the races, the UTMB organisers have done an amazing job actually filming these races, because all the runners, all the elite runners, and this race does attract the best of the best. You know, Kilian Jornet, he won, as I'm sure people know, in spectacular style. He won the UTMB. Tom Evans, the Brit, was there. He came 3rd. And the elite runners have people running with them, who carry Steadicams, small handheld cameras, but steady enough that you can and these images are broadcast live on big screens in the town. So you sit there and you watch it, and it's really mesmerizing to watch. And then also when the races finish, you know, I was sitting one evening after, I think I'd finished my race, after my race, sort of refueling, having a glass of wine and a bit of steak, and in a sort of one of the streets where the runners were coming through, and they were the last sort of, I don't know, last quarter of one of the really long races, the CCC, which is 100K. And it was amazing, because you're sitting there having dinner, and the runners keep coming right by you, and you're clapping and cheering them, and they've been out there for 40 odd hours. And it's just, the atmosphere was wonderful. And also when you do, you know, the race I did, when you come in at the finish, everyone is out on the street, and they're all there lining the streets, cheering you on. It's addictive. I can completely see why people get addicted to running those mountain races.
So you think you might go back? You think you've got unfinished business?
I did it in under 12 hours. I thought I did it in 11 hours and 54 minutes, I think it was. My friend Nuno, who's my Portuguese running friend, he'd said, I think you should be doing it in 10 hours. So I felt a bit. He said, you've got to do it in 10 hours. So now I feel I need to go back. I've got a bit of unfinished business, but and also my friend Susie Chan, who I've run with for years and years and years, my ultra running friend who's now at Peloton. She was supposed to come with me, and for various complicated reasons, it didn't work out. She couldn't come. And she wants to do it. So, I mean, whether or not we can get in next year is a ballot. It's really hard. But I'd like to go and have a go. I know, I have. It was great. The thing that I found surprising. Maybe if I'd actually read more about it or actually thought more about it. The climbs were, you are literally, you set off from, so it's called the OCC because it's Orsières, which is in Switzerland. You go Orsières to Champex-le-Lac into Chamonix, so it's OCC. Right. And those are 3 mountains you climb. And they really are mountains. I mean, the worst one was the middle one, where you go from Tryon up to somewhere called Col de Balme. And somebody had sent me a map, and I've only just studied it in the last couple of days. I'm really glad I didn't look before, because there was 10K from Tryon, which is the aid station at the bottom. There were like the Marathon des Sables, actually, they had aid stations every 10 kilometres, and you could get water and food and all the rest of it. But from Tryon up to the Col de Balme, which is more than 2,000 metres, it was 6 miles. So I climbed for 6 miles non-stop. And it's not sort of gentle climbing, it's switchbacks, really steep climbing. Some of it you had to hold on to ropes, some of it you had to hold on to chains. There were drops off the side of the mountain. And and also then you're contending with the altitude. And my first marathon I did years and years ago now, more than a decade ago, in the London Marathon, and I blacked out because I got dehydrated and I got heat stroke basically. And it was really hot on last week in the Alps, and halfway up this big climb, I started to think again. I was getting really breathless, and my heart rate was going quite high, and I was only hiking. I wasn't even running because you can't run the ups. And I was going up with my poles, and I kept thinking, I felt dizzy. I felt a bit sick. I thought, oh my God. And every time I even stopped for a few seconds, my legs were tingling, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to black out again. What do you do if you black out halfway up a mountain? But I didn't. I got to the top, and then downhill was, I would like to say it was easier, but it wasn't, because it destroyed your quads.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's often said, isn't it, that actually it's, as the race goes on, it's the downhill stuff that you start to dread, which seems kind of counterintuitive, but actually is true when you're there.
I've never done a race like that where you have to run so much downhill, and it was sort of 3 or 4 miles downhill, and they're not smooth paths. You're jumping over, you're having to dancing over tree roots and rocks. People kept saying to me, it's technical, and I didn't understand what they meant by technical, but I now know what they meant by technical. Technical means there are lots of tree roots you're going to trip over, and lots of rocks and stones, and you really have to watch your feet. And that, when your quads are hurting, by the end of it, my legs were screaming. It was really, really painful. But you just want to get it done. The last 3 or 4 miles, really steep downhill into Chamonix, but you can see the town, and you can start hearing the people at the finish line. Right. And you just I just forget the pain, just go.
Would that be your advice then to anyone who was thinking of signing up for one of these races? Would be to really concentrate on maximising kind of elevation in terms of going up and down as much as possible in training?
Yeah, I mean, that's now, if I do one of these again, what I would do definitely is because on the Isle of Wight I did. It seems ridiculous now. I laugh when I think what I did. I sort of went up a few gentle hills and ran them. I ran up a few hills and ran down a few hills, and they were hills. They were small hills, and this was such a 2-3 hours of going up non-stop and no respite at all. If I did it again, I would definitely go somewhere, go to the Lake District, or go to Wales, or go to Scotland, some really properly hilly place, a mountainous place, and practice hiking properly with poles up, and then running down. Or go, for me, I'm in London, so somewhere like Box Hill, I would just repeatedly go up and down Box Hill. And I still don't quite know how you strengthen your quads to deal with that pounding. I asked Holly Rush, who did she did the CCC, and I asked her how did she do this? She did one of the longer ones, and maybe it was the TDS. Anyway, she did one of the longer ones, not quite the full, but one of the longer ones. And she said she does normal marathon training, and then she gets a Stairmaster and spends weeks going on one of those. Yeah. So that's it is a case of doing that. And just really getting your legs ready for what's in store.
This is the Runner's World podcast.
You have done a lot of really impressive endurance races now. Like obviously the Marathon des Sables was one you did a few years back. How does something like this compare to it, or is it so different that it's hard to compare them at all?
No, it was actually really similar. I mean, it was obviously a completely different terrain, but it was in my head. It's a mental game. It is a mental game, and it was very, very similar. And I felt I didn't know if I could do it. I wanted to pull out before. I kept thinking, what am I doing? And I really wanted to pull out in the run up to it. And I thought maybe I should just not do it. Nobody's going to know. Again, I haven't really told anybody I've done it. I haven't said I've done it publicly. I just kept it really quiet. I thought, it doesn't matter. You don't make a big deal of it. It doesn't matter if you don't finish it. That's fine. And it was one of those things I just went out and you have to, it does become something where you're fighting your head and just saying, okay, just it's one foot in front of the other. Keep going. And it's only when I was sort of, coming up to the last mountain, and this, you're going for 12 hours, and there was no stopping. I wasn't. I went through the aid stations, but I wasn't stopping. I kind of grabbed water, I grabbed food. I must have been in there for 5 minutes, no more. And I never ever, when I trail run in the UK, I'm notorious amongst my friends. I'm very quite happy to have a little break, and stop and faff around, take a few photos. I hardly took any photos. I hardly stopped at all. But you just have to, you kind of blank out the time. I remember looking at my watch and suddenly thinking, gosh, it's 4:45. I've been going since 9:15. I had the concept of time goes out the window. And it's just one of those things you just, again, I got to the finish line and I just thought, this is like the Marathon des Sables. I didn't think I could do this. And again, I have proved that, I am much stronger than I think I am. My body is much stronger than my head thinks it is. And you can do it. It's which is what I love about these races. It's really empowering to think that I'm 54 years old. And that was the other thing, actually. I started looking in the weeks before, and I started looking at the past times that people had done in my category, 50 to 54, and thinking, how long is this going to take me? And it was 11, 12 hours. And I thought, really? And also then I looked at the number of people in my age group, and there were hardly any doing it. There were hardly any women my age. And I was thinking, why am I doing this? What have I let myself in for? And so that had started playing on my mind as well. And, on the day, there were about 50, I think there were 55 women my age group, and I came 14th. And I thought, that's all right.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's all right. Yeah. So, girl from London, no training at all. So that's what I love about it. It actually, you kind of think, well, actually, you can do it. You can. If you try, you can.
Totally, yeah. And your marathon times have been improving, haven't they, for many years? So I think that is really inspiring for people who maybe come into running, in the 30s or 40s, to be like, you've actually got, you've got potentially got a decade or more of getting better at running, because there's a lot of sports where that's possibly not going to be the case, and I think running is quite unique in that sense, actually.
I think that's what people often say to me, oh, how do you do it? Oh, it's too late for me. And I say, I'm too old. And I say, well, how old are you? And they go, 43. Like, I didn't start till I was 42, and I'm still getting, well, I don't know about still, but until literally last year, I was still getting faster.
Yeah.
And I was, if I hadn't been doing this other job all this year, my plan had been to train really hard for the London Marathon and try and get a PB this year, which is not going to, I don't think, going to happen, because I haven't done the training. But I think you can. That's what's wonderful about distance running, and you can get older and you can get a lot faster. I mean, my fastest marathon, I think I did in 2019, and I did my first marathon in 2011. Yeah. So that's what I love about the sport. Is it's not something that you just do when you're young. It's Susie Chan and I both came to running late, in our late 30s. And have both got faster and faster and stronger. And there aren't many sports, I think, that you can say that, say that about.
Definitely. As far as like fitting in training, because as you say, like you're very busy anyway, but you're particularly busy over the last year. Obviously, you didn't get on the Stairmaster and do quite enough reps of Box Hill. But how do you manage to fit it in? Because I think from the outside, it would seem like, wow, that's someone who's obviously extremely busy, quite a high pressure job. Is it hard to fit in the training for a kind of endurance sport like running?
I had to. I mean, I did. You do one big. I have been doing 1 or 2 big runs a week, and it boiled down to I was working every day except Monday, and it boiled down to running to and from work. So I would. Right. That's what it was, and I was running back and forth from work. I was having to do my long runs on my one day off, or if I couldn't quite fathom that, because I was getting really tired doing both jobs, and if I couldn't quite cope with that, I would, on a Sunday when I did the politics show, I'd have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go on air from 9 till 10, and a couple of times I went running straight after. So I'd either run home and do it a long way round, or one morning, Nuno, the Portuguese runner, pitched up at the BBC and was really brutal, made me do like 15 miles. Come on, no stopping. I was so tired. But you just do it. You have to do it. And you know with distance running, and with marathon, there's no corner cutting. You have to do it. And if you don't put the training in, you're not going to get the results at the end of it, and you have to just do enough that you can get round.
And you are going to do London then, by the sound of things.
Oh yeah, and that's really soon, isn't it? That's like
Yeah,
five,
a month, yeah.
that's it's a month away. Yes, I am in London. I've got my Good for Age place, which that's what I need to try and hold on to. So yes, that's. I've just been on a 5K run, and my legs were feeling. That was my first run since the OCC, and my legs were fairly tired. But yes, I need to sort of start going up on that again. But I need to. I want to get my Good for Age place, which I think I have to get under 4 hours or something. So I'll see how I do.
I'm sure you can do it. Yeah, it's a lot flatter, isn't it? It's a lot flatter than the OCC.
It's a lot flatter.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot flatter, yes.
So thanks so much for making the time to come on the Runners World podcast, and congratulations about the OCC. Sounds like you'll be back at some point to Chamonix, so we look forward to that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, do you know the one thing about the OCC, the UTMB, can you imagine you run all that mileage, you do all those miles, and do you know what? There's no medal.
Yeah.
They don't have medals. There's no medal at the end of the OCC or the UTMB for them. That played with my head a bit. I couldn't quite get my head around that one. You get a gilet. So I have a very, very pale blue gilet that says I've finished it. Yeah. Nothing for my medal rack though. Oh well. I'll get one from London hopefully.
Yeah. We know you did it. You officially did it. So
I definitely did it.
Yeah. So thanks again for your time. Much appreciated. Great to talk to you about the OCC and your running in general. And thanks for making the time to come on the podcast.
Pleasure. Lovely to talk to you.
So that brings us to the end of this week's Runners World podcast. A huge thanks to our guest, Sophie Raworth, and to you, of course, for listening. You can once again subscribe to 3 issues of Runners World for just £5. Head over to hurstmagazines.co.uk/Runners World podcast to get this exclusive listener offer. You can listen to the Runners World podcast on Acast, iTunes, and all your favourite podcast apps. Just search Runners World UK. Please subscribe. It makes us very happy. And thanks very much for listening. We'll see you again next week.